Joining me is Brian Darling, who is the Director of Government Relations for the Heritage Foundation. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
You know, we were talking about earlier, in fact, Michelle touched on this, about what does and does not happen if there is a government slowdown. In fact, Congressman Jordan mentioned a little bit about that. What are we actually looking at? If we see, you know, by Friday afternoon they don't reach an agreement, what happens?
The average American probably won't see much, but the Office of Management and Budget has sent out directives to different agencies. Pretty much, you can think of it this way: essential personnel will be on the job. Non-essential personnel will not be on the job. For example, the military obviously continues to move forth. Mandatory spending through entitlement programs, those checks will still go out the door, but you talk about national parks, you talk about visa and passport offices, stuff that isn't essential for the day-to-day activities of the federal government, they will cease to move forward. And you look back, 1995, 1996, you had 800,000 employees that were furloughed, but they were put back on in the end. They were made whole. They were paid the money that they were supposed to be paid during that time. So you look back at the example of 95 and 96, and what we see is that it really didn't disrupt the federal government very much. It's a slowdown, not a shutdown.
Now, you mentioned 95, 96, a different political environment. And some here in Washington are, you know, I think on both sides now comparing this back to 95, 96. I think you see some, I mean, I can't read it any other way, that the president and some in the ranks of the Democrats are kind of hoping, I think, for a government shutdown, hoping for the same outcome that happened back in 95, 96, different time.
Yeah, they're acting like it. I mean, look what happened. Look, why are we in the situation we're in right now? It's because the House spent a good deal of time, a whole week, debating over 100 amendments that were voted on the House floor. They sat down, they were in till all hours of the morning, and on a Saturday morning, they voted and passed a piece of legislation. It wasn't as far right as many would like. It wasn't a moderate piece of legislation. It was a consensus piece of legislation that came out, $61 billion in cuts, defunded Planned Parenthood, defunded elements of Obamacare, stopped some of the EPA regulations. So it was a bit controversial, but that was their position. What did the Senate do? They went on vacation. They went on vacation the next week. They didn't do anything. Senator Harry Reid scheduled a vote on a patent bill when he came back in a session. So they really weren't intent on moving forward and passing anything. And if you want to put the blame on anybody's shoulders, Senator Harry Reid's probably a good place to put it, because he still has yet to have a full and fair debate on a continuing resolution to fund the government for the remainder of the year. He had two pro forma votes, one on a Republican plan, one on a Democrat plan. Neither one got over 50 votes in the Senate. So the Senate has really fallen down flat in their face, and that's kind of why we're in the situation we are right now.
Well, O'Brien, you bring up an interesting point when you look at what the Senate has not done. Let's say the shoe was on the other foot. The Republicans were in the Senate, controlling the Senate. Democrats controlled the House, and the Democrats kept sending measures over, and the Republicans refused to respond or act upon it. I'd have to say that I think the media would probably respond in a different way than they are right now.
Yeah, you're not hearing the media say, why isn't the Senate doing its job? Why is it that the president endorsed a resolution in the Senate that only got 42 votes? He lost 11 members of his own caucus. The president has not sat down, had a real good faith negotiation. Clearly the Senate hasn't, because they haven't even established a position, yet the mainstream media seems to ignore it. They really want to blame Republicans. Democrats want to see Republicans take the blame for it, but the bottom line is that the Democrats haven't done their job in the Senate, and the president hasn't shown any leadership on this issue.
Now, today the president met with the House Speaker, John Boehner, and met with Hal Rogers, chairman of the Budget Committee, the Appropriations Committee, rather, and they were putting a proposal on the table, and the president rejected it. But he has said that, look, we have agreed to the same amount of cuts as the Republicans. It's just in different areas. Republicans say that's smoke and mirrors.
It is, and the $10 billion we've seen in cuts to date are to low-hanging fruit. We're not when we're talking about $61 billion, we're talking about some programs that are clearly difficult to cut, some projects that many members of Congress want. But the $10 billion that have been cut to date, I believe half of that number is earmarks, and earmarks that weren't going to be expended anyways. You have another.
So it's really not money. It wasn't going to be spent.
Exactly. You have another package now of $12 billion, some of which which is low-hanging fruit. And the president claims he wants $71 billion in cuts using some fuzzy math. The real number is about $33 billion, maybe be a little bit higher than that. But the American people want more than that. We're $1.5 trillion in debt this year alone. We're $14.29 trillion in debt as a nation, and carrying this debt on to future generations. At some point, the federal government has to cut some real programs.
Well, in defending that today, he said, well, look, the Republicans are wanting to, they're wanting to change policy instead of just dealing with the budget dollars. I mean, can you separate the two? I mean, when you spend your money, it promotes a policy.
Exactly right. I mean, you are promoting a policy. One of the controversial provisions is provisions for abortions, federally funded abortions in the District of Columbia, and it appears that the president's willing to shut the government down over that. So he finds it that important to continue to funnel money into D.C. for abortions that he's willing to shut down the whole government and fight that fight over a bill that cuts exactly what he wants to cut.
In terms of where the Republicans stand today, does it appear to you from your dealings on the Hill that the majority of the Republicans are dug in and they're ready to fight this fight?
Yeah, it looks like Republicans in the House, they've made their stand. They've put out a number. They put out $61 billion. They're willing to walk back from that a little bit. But they've done a good faith negotiation. They're ready to fight for a reasonable number that the American people want to see. They don't want to see pro forma cuts that won't really cut any programs. We need to cut into that $1.5 trillion, and we need to start right now.
Well, Brian, this can get all confusing to the folks at home that are watching this because we've kind of been bouncing back and forth between the temporary funding measure, the CR, which funds through the remainder of this fiscal year, and then we also mentioned today in talking with Congressman Price about the Ryan budget. Does this battle over the temporary spending of the government or the budget for the remainder of this year, does that really lay the groundwork for the real battle over the budget for next year?
The battle over the remaining funds to be expended for this year translates into the budget that Paul Ryan's put together for next year and the future. I mean, Paul Ryan's budget is a forward-looking budget that will cut massive amounts from the federal government. But right now, the fight is on funding the government for the remainder of this year, and Republicans need to dig in their heels, fight hard, make sure they win this battle so they can go in strong to the next battle.
Brian, thanks for taking time out to join us tonight. I appreciate you being here, and we appreciate the partnership of the Heritage Foundation working with us on this.
Thank you.